column is about the economic challenges facing Rachel Reeves as she starts to put together her budget for the end of November. You are perhaps suggesting, and this is one of my favourite topics, and I'm so pleased that you wrote it rather than me, because you can in a way that I can't for reasons that we'll come on to. You think possibly the debate that we have about who should pay what and where spending should go has been somewhat distorted. Is that right?
It certainly has been. I think one of the most important things for any government, but particularly for a government under such pressure ahead of such a difficult budget, is to have a strong, clear narrative. This is what we're about. This is why we are doing what we're doing. And I think there are two words that should define the budget. One is fairness and one is necessity. Now, the necessity part is all those pressures coming on the UK with a relatively weak economy, relatively low historic productivity growth and the rest of it, and symbolised most obviously by the bond markets. In other words, it is necessity for the Chancellor to try to stick to her fiscal rules. She has to be aware of what the bond markets are thinking, and the biggest worry that she has is the bond markets think that public spending in the UK under a Labour government is running out of control or is likely to run out of control. That is an iron necessity. Now, on the fairness side, I think the biggest unfairness, in a sense, in the country we don't talk nearly enough about is intergenerational unfairness. And I'm really concerned by the number of people in their teens and 20s and early 30s who are unable to get a house, who find the jobs market much, much tougher than people did when I was at that age myself. And I think the amount of public money and wealth and protection that goes to the relatively elderly, relatively wealthy is disproportionate. And that's really what I'm going for here. And the figures I was mentioning, again, I'll come back to them because they're so important. The amount of money we think, it's very hard to get hard figures on this. This comes from a mental health charity. We think is being spent on people with mental health conditions, very often younger people with mental health conditions, about which there has been an absolute paroxysm of media commentary, is around 12 point something billion a year. So 12 point something. And the amount of money we spend on pensioners is around 177 billion a year. And that has been going up and up and up. Back in the 1950s, it was about 2% of GDP. It's now north of 8% of GDP. So if you're looking at one part of the public spending envelope, one part of the benefits envelope in particular, that may be running out of control, it's what we're doing for pensioners, not what we're doing for young people.
It's interesting because when people talk about welfare or think about welfare, most of the public, I don't think, see pensions as being part of the welfare bill, even though obviously it is, and it's a growing part of it. You write in the column that Labour is facing a prisoner's dilemma. I think that was a government source who used that phrase when it comes to pensions. So the idea is that all the parties know that this is unsustainable, but no one wants to be the first to move. And actually, there have been occasions when somebody has suggested, I mean, Torsten Bell is a great example. When he was director of the Resolution Foundation, he was very clear on all the points that you're making.
He'll be less clear now he's in the Treasury.
Yes, now he's a Labour MP and a Treasury Minister, and he's gone very quiet on the subject. Kemi Badenoch has occasionally floated the idea of axing the triple lock and then very, very quickly changed her mind.
I don't think she's ever said we're going to axe it, but it was very interesting, I thought, her conference speech, which was in many ways one of her most successful and powerful speeches she's made yet. But
she seemed cheerful and happy for
She did. A lot of it was about honesty. We are the honest people. We're not like the Weasley, slimy Labour Party who pretend to evade decisions. We take really hard, honest, serious decisions about the British economy. We will never fool you. We will never. And she said that again and again and again. And she was talking again about young people and mental health and the rising benefits bill for them. And she went on at great length about that and kept talking about honesty and telling people how it is. And I was waiting for her to come on to pensions, and she did not mention the word once. And now, the audience, there's an awful lot of frosted grey and white hair in the audience, and perhaps a few bald spots as well, and that might have been something to do with it. But she was not honest enough, she was not brave enough to discuss the pensions triple lock in front of that audience.
Well, isn't part of the issue that everyone in politics knows that this would be electoral suicide? Look at what happened to Theresa May when she suggested that possibly if you have been lucky enough to accrue significant housing wealth over the course of your life, you may contribute some of that housing wealth to your own social care. That lost to the 2017 election. And obviously we've had the winter fuel allowance use, which is a relatively tiny amount of money.
Yes,
it's 1.5 billion.
I was talking to a minister about this. Have you any idea the pain of the scars on our backs from that winter fuel allowance? Have you any idea how much damage that did to the government? Think about that when you think about the difficulty of dealing with pensioners. And we should say it's not just the pensions triple lock, which says that pensions go up by 2.5% or inflation or average wages, whichever is the highest every year. So they always outperform.
It's ratcheting up.
Other parts of the system, always outperform. The Conservatives were going to do the triple lock plus at the last election, which meant all of that plus a guarantee that if you're dragged into an extra tax band because of your pension, you won't have to pay the extra tax. So that was even more outrageous in my view. There comes a point where the British political system cannot allow the wealthiest and the most elderly people, even if they vote regularly, to hold everybody else to ransom. And I think the dislocation of so many young people from the system, however we describe it generally, is much more serious than people realize. I think a lot of the turbulence in our politics, a lot of the anger in our politics is because we have unplugged economically 1 or 2 generations of younger people from the entire system. And unless a government is prepared to confront that, and unless a government is prepared to do the obvious thing, which is to transfer some of the wealth, some of the help from the older and better off to the younger and poorer, then what's the point of any of it?
Well, we should point out, because one of the things that comes up a lot in these conversations is that not all pensioners are wealthy, and pensioner poverty is very real and devastating. But we were actually discussing this on, I think, a You Ask Us episode recently about, pensioner poverty rates in terms of the working age poverty rate and also child poverty, which is a key issue for Labour. And pensioner poverty is lower than the working age poverty rate and is almost about half the rate of child poverty. So there is a sort of distortion in how we talk about this.
When the triple lock first came in, it was because there was a specific and real problem of pensioner poverty. And that, because of the triple lock, has been eroded or smoothed over.
Which is a good thing.
Which is a good thing. But, in terms of making a fuss, people who are actually doing quite well never make a fuss. You don't get people angrily writing to the newspapers who have winter holidays or are doing rather well or have given a lot of money to their children. They keep stum. They keep quiet. And talking to government, they think about 10% of the pensioners we're talking about would come into that category. It may be more than that. But even if it's only them we're talking about, we're still talking about a lot more money than we're spending on young people with mental health problems.
I want to ask about messaging, because part of the reason that politicians are so reluctant to touch this, and this is Conservative and Labour and actually, the Lib Dems and Reform and everyone as well. Nobody really wants to touch this, is you don't want to look like you're attacking the most vulnerable people in society, particularly when they say that they have paid in all of their lives, although, as you mentioned, the amount that they paid in, given that the triple lock has increased the state pension and people are living longer.
It is the last piece of the welfare system that is properly contributory. That is true.
So there is a question here about messaging. Now, I was talking to somebody who used to be an advisor for a Labour minister, who said that the way that Labour could get ahead of this debate is by trying to frame it in terms of sort of patriotism and wanting to invest in our children's future, our grandchildren's future, and asking a generation that is very politically involved and active to go, can you think ahead for the future benefit of this country and for the people that you really care about? Do you think that sort of patriotism, investing in the future of your children?
I'm not sure about the patriotism point. What I really strongly feel, increasingly, almost week by week, I'm getting very frustrated by the lack of the ability of this government, or the willingness of this government, to make a proper political argument. Ideally before they announce the policy that follows from it. But I think so many people around the country say, well, I don't know what Keir Starmer stands for. I don't know why this is really, we could even call it a Labour government. I don't know what they're about. Imagine if they came out and said, look, The really serious issue is younger voters haven't got a proper stake in the system. They're being badly treated. We're letting them down. And so we're going to do something bold and controversial to help them. And kept repeating that message and kept making the arguments using the kind of numbers I've been using today, and made it again and again and again. We have to get away from this idea that you can't win a political argument in this culture anymore. If you don't have a political argument, you certainly won't win it. But they have to start making this case and making it strongly and vehemently, whether they use words like patriotism or simple fairness. And they talk about all those younger voters, who are drifting away from the Labour Party. They could get them back again.
Who are going to be able to vote at 16 and 17
Absolutely.
now. So one of the other things that you mentioned, and you're moving away from the specific topic, is about how the political landscape, culture, the pace of it all has changed. The fact that it's cheaper and easier for media organisations to do polling than ever before. So ministers know on a day-to-day basis just how unpopular they are. MPs know. And also the way social media works means that something can become a story very, very quickly if you have a few very motivated people involved. How much of the lack of willingness to make an argument and to really put your message out there is to do with just the rhythm of it all, the way it all works, and how quickly things move?
Yeah, well, that's a very good question. I've tried to frame the piece around that, the sort of hysterical speed and aggression and personality of the media landscape we are inside at the moment, whereby, we've been talking about the Chinese spy case, we're talking about pensions. Next week, nobody will be able to remember anything we've said. The thing will have moved on, and we're in a system where nothing sticks in people's minds, in voters' minds either. It's one piece of kind of clickbait, high calorie, low value political news day by day, hour by hour. And it's personalized, and it's venomous, and it's aggressive. And I almost get the sense that we remember nothing, we learn nothing. And the only way, I think, to deal with that is to go back and make old-fashioned, big, clear political arguments again and again and again until they start to stick. Otherwise, I think it's going to be impossible for any progressive or indeed conservative government to change anything. I mean, if you want an example of how quickly, I think this is, in a sense, a silly example, but it's not entirely silly. Since the arrival of the iPhone in the UK, we've had 7 prime ministers. In the 42 years before the arrival of the iPhone, we had 7 prime ministers. In other words, the rate of attrition of prime ministers has rocketed with new technology. It's not just, of course, new technology, it's economic failure and all the rest of it, but it's been accelerated, I think, by new technology. And it's not just us. Look at the French, look at the Spanish, look around us.
Yes, I think we've had 6 prime ministers and 8 chancellors who have all served under Larry the Cat, who is possibly the longest serving official that Downing Street
Whether he's got an iPhone, I think he's certainly got an Instagram account.